I'd like to call the meeting of the Water, Waste and Environment Standing Policy Committee to order on this June the 9th, 2025. We are meeting here on Treaty 1 land, the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and we are also in the national homeland of the Red River Métis, where we receive our water from Shoal Lake 40 in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Ross Eady. I'll be your chairperson today. I'm the city councillor from the Minorski ward. And with me, we have Councillor Chambers from the St. River. And we also have with us today Councillor Mays from the St. Vital ward. And with us from our public administration, we have Mr. Tim Shanks and his team. And we also have with us Brendan Harris, our senior clerk. Yeah. And Councillor Chambers, would you move take minutes of May 5th, taken as read and confirmed?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Nobody's opposed. Councillor Mays, did you want to move a motion in regards to our colleague?
A motion to excuse Councillor Rollins' absence for personal reasons.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Nobody's opposed. That is carried. Mr. Harris, do we have any delegations?
We've not had any delegations registered for today's meeting.
Okay. So we'll move to report number 1, which is the hourly rates for, I guess you call it equipment or heavy equipment. Report number 1. Mr. Shanks.
Yes, this is an award that has to come to SBC because it awards an operating budget that's more than 1 year, spans more than 1 year. So this is a regular occurrence here. This is a contract for heavy equipment at the Brady landfill. It's an hourly basis, and we only pay on actual hours needed. But you can see in the report, the way it's worded, we get authorization up to an estimated max amount of hours. So that's all these dollar values here reflect the up to max limit. So it's worth, that max limit's worth about $2.5 to $3 million per year, but we award these for 5 years. So the total 5-year amount is $13.6 million. There are clauses in these contracts. This is very typical of our hourly equipment contracts or our chemical supply contracts, that sort of thing. They include clauses in the contract that index some price adjustments over the 5 years, like if they're tied to like the CPI index, StatsCan indices, this sort of thing. It's a very small amount, but I know we do get these questions sometimes about indexing to fuel costs and so it's a common practice at the city. Those are in there, and the assumptions in this authorization of cost assume the worst case for the city and that the indexes all go as high as possible. So having said all that, I would like to flag, we didn't pick the lowest bidder here. We picked the second lowest bidder. There was 9 bids. They were all pretty tight, but the bidder we pick, it's not just price. It also has to do with demonstrated experience and that sort of thing. So we don't always go with the lowest cost, but I just wanted to flag this is an example of one where we didn't actually go with technically the lowest bidder. Yeah, I guess it's really the whole review of the project. So
The hourly rate acknowledges the cost of their equipment that they're providing.
yeah, there's different rates. It's a bunch of different equipment, and each piece of equipment has a different rate and a different estimated hours of use, and it rolls up into a total dollar amount for that contract, and that's the $2.5 to $3 million a year worth of hours of different.
Any questions, Cole?
Yeah, so it's a variety of different equipment you state,
Yes.
and how often is it used, like say throughout the year?
Daily. Well, like this is the earthworks, like the earth moving, like the large equipment used to move material around at Brady.
So is it more cost effective to set it up like this, or that we have, own this equipment and just have dedicated staff towards
Yeah,
the daily tasks?
this practice, I believe, has been established quite a while ago, but we do keep an eye on overall cost. To do exactly what you're saying from time to time, take a look and say, okay, well, you know, what's the value here? But no, historically, this has been what we've been doing for a long time, so yeah.
And again, it makes more sense to do it this
Yeah.
way than, okay, financially.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. That's it, Counselor.
Questions, Brian? Councilor Mead?
No.
Okay, well, whenever you move it.
Okay, I'll move, the public service recommendation to, is this just for information
No, it's
or
we
approval?
need approval for award, yeah, because
Okay.
because the contract involves future operating budgets.
I recommend the approval of the, public service recommendation.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Nobody's opposed, that is carried. Number 2, in-house leaf. Whatever. In-house leaf and yard waste collection services. It's my understanding you need a little more time to put this through the report information system.
Yep, this is a request for an extension. This is this in-depth look at costing for leaf and yard waste that was requested last meeting. To look at providing leaf and yard waste collection either in a downtown-ish zone on its own or citywide on its own as well. And we're effectively done, but we're just trying to do a kind of final review, make sure that everything is included that needs to be included. So the request as written here is requesting up to 60 days. I think we only need 30, but I asked for 60 because we got burned on the 30 before. I'm not done. It's 30 days already. So technically it's asking for 60, but I do expect this to be ready for our next meeting in 3 weeks.
So
If
this,
not, it would be September, right?
this is just, setting up a pilot?
No, this is the costing of
Going in-house on leaf and yard waste collection.
yeah, we did a last July, we did a costing of leaf and yard waste, recycling and garbage collection in a downtown zone. Did that analysis and this is sort of a follow-up question on just doing leaf and yard waste on its own.
Internally.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm gonna ask the clerk if a motion to just rescind is in order here. I don't really feel it's a productive use of Mr. Gorachek's time at this point to continue on with this because
It's already
I know
done.
what's coming is, no, actually, it'll be more expensive to do it.
Just so you know, the
In-house.
work is already done.
Gorachek's been one of the better public servants to deal with in my experience, so I don't go through any more theater on this with him, so.
Would that be in order, or I'm not sure how this one started?
This one did start as a motion at council, so it would need to be a recommendation to council, but
Oh,
we could
okay.
recommend to council that the original motion be received as information.
Mr. Border Truck's already done the work, don't you?
Too much more expensive. Sure, but I'll move to, what are we doing here today? Receiving this for information or
It's an
granting
extension,
extension?
extension of time up to 60 days.
I'll
is the
move a 60-day
recommendation.
extension, up to 60.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Yeah, nobody's opposed, that is carried. Thank you, Councilor Mays. Winnipeg Climate Action Plan 2024 Annual Report. Mr. Shanks.
Yes, Ms. Braditz is here to do a presentation to summarize the Winnipeg Climate Action Plan 2024 annual report. We got some slides set up.
Just note, we would need a suspension of the rules just to consider the presentation, just as it wasn't published with the agenda.
So moved.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Nobody's opposed, that's carried.
you for that. This is our 2024 Climate Action Plan Annual Report. So this is looking at the actions taken in 2024 and for our climate action targets, and also looks at our corporate GHG inventory. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how we put this together. So the Office of Sustainability, we reach out across the organization. So this is really contribution across all departments on what's been happening in 2024 as part of our activities to address climate action. And this summarizes that. We also gather data from across the organization to put together the corporate GHG inventory. So I wanted to thank everybody for their help in putting this together. So at the City of Winnipeg, our Winnipeg 2045 is our highest level climate policy. This was adopted in 2022, and this lays out our climate action target to meet or exceed greenhouse gas emissions reduction target of 20% by 2030 and to meet net zero emissions by 2050. We also have the Community Energy Investment Roadmap that lays out what it would take to actually meet these targets. And so we have looking at the actions related to both of these and the Winnipeg Climate Action Plan. So the Community Energy Investment Roadmap looks at activities across various areas, and I'm going to go through that as part of the report. So if you look at the SEER and our annual report, you'll see that it's laid out in the same way. The whole city approach looks at how we as an organization are embedding climate action into our decision making, our policy and program development. And these are activities that are happening across the organization. So our senior management team, Climate Steering Committee in 2024 created 3 action teams and a core working group to advance climate action. So those 3 action teams, they bring people from across departments and look at emerging climate issues that don't really live in any one particular department. So we had an action team looking at electric vehicles, electric vehicle charging. We looked at energy planning and how we can work with Manitoba Hydro and Efficiency Manitoba. We also looked at environmental benefits, which is bit of a financial mechanism related to climate action. The core working group is an interdepartmental team that was formed to support the update to the Winnipeg Climate Action Plan, project that is underway starting this year. In our social and sustainable procurement, we also saw the introduction of environmental clauses and specifications and social value menu to pilot to see what is happening when we get proposals and applications as part of our procurement process. And a lot of work was done through the Housing Accelerator Fund capital grant incentive. So $25 million was awarded to support affordable housing projects and projects in downtown Winnipeg. This is related to climate action because having more dense neighborhoods that support walking, transit use, and energy efficient buildings really underpins our transition to net zero emissions. Council also approved amendments to the Winnipeg zoning bylaw and the downtown zoning bylaw. So the zoning bylaw And downtown zoning bylaw, I know that there's been a lot of work related to this. And it also allows for more dense neighborhoods, more in development, close to transit ways and walkable neighborhoods. The areas of green buildings, there was a lot more policy work and strategic planning happening. So work continued with the green building policy update for new city-owned buildings and major additions. This is to bring that policy in line with our net zero emission target. And the building emission reduction strategy was developed for existing city buildings. So I know we're going to talk about that a little bit today as well. That's also on the agenda. And this is looking at really those building performance improvements to existing buildings and our new buildings being more in line with that net zero emission target. There's also been ongoing work while that policy development is happening, looking at these active projects related to South Winnipeg Recreation Campus, the Winnipeg North Transit Garage, and East of the Red Recplex. So looking at what those requirements and building performance, energy efficiency, and emissions profiles for buildings related to SEER and how those can be applied to those design processes that are underway right now. In the areas of zero emission transportation, we saw Fort Rouge Garage facility modifications in order to service and repair battery electric and hydrogen fuel cell buses in 2024. We also saw an update to our city's electric vehicle charging stations. They were switched to a fee structure to encourage turnover and increase access to these chargers. This happened at the end of the 2-year electric vehicle charging pilot project, 2024. But local renewable energy, so electricity is our lowest GHG energy source, and local renewable energy in the city can help supplement the grid. So council approved the exemption from development permit process for solar photovoltaic systems that are mounted on buildings at least 8 feet and ground installations. Transit also received a draft report detailing preliminary design and class 3 cost estimates for a grid-tied microgrid Brandon garage. So that's part of that overall bus electrification project. And in the area of sustainable waste management, we saw continued support for Compost Winnipeg and those support payments, and also the establishment of 15 drop-off stations to divert residential food waste from landfill. That has been a very popular program launch in 2024, and we're looking to see have more data to report next year when we've seen a full year of that program. We've also seen improvements in our multifamily waste diversion, promotion, and education. Excuse me. We've launched programs in collaboration with Winnipeg Public Libraries to promote those waste diversion programs in multifamily buildings. And that's been supported by our new waste diversion specialist. So talk a little bit about climate resilience. So this is not our emission reduction work, although it's tied closely to it. I know sometimes when we talk about climate resilience, it can be a bit more abstract, but I think when we know what's been happening locally and with our neighbors across Manitoba, climate resilience is an important part of our work. So we can see increased impacts from climate change, extreme storm events, increased freeze thaw cycles, also wildfire and smoke events. So in 2024, the Winnipeg Comprehensive Urban Forestry Strategy focused its efforts on accelerating the public tree replacement and pruning cycle targets. So looking at improving our green infrastructure in the city. We also saw the completion of Poverty Reduction Strategy's first year under its new plan, with the installation of 8 hydration stations to increase access to clean drinking water during the summer season, especially during those heat events. We saw continued public engagement on the Winnipeg Clean Air Spaces project. So this project is very specifically looking at those smoke events and making sure people have access to clean air spaces. There was a clean air exercise and a key stakeholder workshop held in 2024. The city also contributed $455,000 through various community-based initiatives on nature-based solutions and strategic land use. So these looked at community gardens, community tree planting, and other programs like that. Now I'm going to switch and talk a little bit more specifically about the 2024 corporate GHG inventory. And I just want to preface this with, I do not have all the numbers off by heart, but if you have a question and give me a moment, I can surely find them. So in 2024, we had just over 319,000 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent in emissions. So this represented about a 4% increase from 2023. We saw decreases in emissions in the building sector. We saw increases in emissions in the water and wastewater sector and in the corporate waste sector. And those changes in emissions are mostly linked to weather in terms of the water and waste sector and building sector, and because of increase in waste landfill. So these changes in emissions are not tied to any particular program or action that the city undertook in 2024. In terms of energy use, we saw a slight decrease from 2023. Mostly decreases in the building sector. We saw an increase in the water and wastewater sector, and the changes were linked to weather. So we saw in 2024, if you remember that winter, it was relatively mild. And we also had a big increase in precipitation. So we had about 54% more precipitation in 2024 compared to 2023. The fleet emissions in 2024 were relatively stable overall compared to 2023. So we had slight increase in transit, a bit of decrease in water and waste, and generally others. When we look at our flexible workplace program, like last year when we talked about transportation related emissions, we could talk a little bit about how commuting related emissions were slightly down. 2023 and 2024, pretty much the same in that category. Just for interest's sake, when talking to transit about this difference in overall emissions for related to transit, this is giving the same amount of service in 23 and 2024, but like a slight change in efficiency across the fleet can show this kind of GHG emissions. So if they had more wind resistance or snow resistance, you could see a change like this. So when we look overall at our emissions, you can see that corporate waste is the largest source of emissions. This is about 66.6% of our corporate emissions. In 2023, we started looking at our corporate waste as everything that's landfilled at Brady Road Resource Management Facility. So that brings us in line with the PCP protocols. So we're using the same protocols as other municipalities across Canada. Part of the thinking about this, so everything that goes to Brady is reported corporately, is because we can control Brady, and our programs that we've implemented and are planning to implement can impact this GHG profile. Second largest corporately source of emissions is vehicle fleet. So this includes waste collection, leachate hauling, staff commuting, transit, heavy equipment use. And we're working every year to improve these numbers. I just want to flag that we expect in the future to capture more heavy equipment use. See buildings and then water and wastewater are smaller. But if we look at energy use, you'll see that vehicle fleet is still the largest section there, and then followed by buildings. When you look at corporate GHG emissions by sector over time, you can see that we do have some variability, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. This difference between 23 and 24 being mostly related to weather and a bit of waste isn't unique to what we've been seeing over the last 5 to 7 years. So if you look at 2020 here, you see the waste section was a bit bigger. This is a year we saw a lot of basically people cleaning out garages and basements and also renovation work happening because it was a strange year. 2021 went down a bit. There was less activity overall happening. 2022 was a very cold winter and wet spring. 2023 was a relatively warm winter compared to 2022. And then we have 2024. So overall, we're seeing changes happening, but not specifically from city programs. When we look at the profile with taking out that waste effect, you can see more clearly that that transportation vehicle sector is the largest source of emissions, and that the water and wastewater can really be affected by precipitation. So 2022, we had that really wet spring. Talk a little bit about the heating load on buildings and how that impacts our emissions. So we're looking at heating degree days, building energy use, and building emissions. You see they fairly much follow each other. So colder winters, we burn more natural gas, we have higher emissions. Warmer winters, we burn less natural gas, we have lower emissions in buildings. As we improve building performance and do fuel switching for buildings, we should see the heating degree days and the building's emissions start to decouple. The impact of precipitation on wastewater. In the years that we have higher precipitation and higher runoff, we have more volume going to our wastewater treatment plants. Treating wastewater requires energy, both electricity and natural gas, to do those processes properly. So in years when we have the higher precipitation, we will see higher GHG emissions from the water and wastewater sector. I did get a question about this, about why it's not always one-to-one. And we can see that there can be influences from whether a rainfall event happens in a combined sewer overflow area or not, on greenfield or hardscape. That's why those our larger systems and our land use design can act the GHG emissions from our water and wastewater sector. I want to talk about the waste and diverted stream emissions and tie back to a question about, do our programs actually make a difference on our emissions? So looking between 2020 and 2023, the beige area is landfilled waste. And our emissions basically follow the top of that line. Emissions from biosolids went to zero in 2021. We've had 4 years of 100% biosolids beneficial use, so avoided GHG emissions from biosolids. In the blue space, we see that's the emissions avoided from soil fabrication. The green band is emissions avoided from our leaf and yard waste composting program. And the grayish newspaper color band shows emissions avoided from our paper and cardboard recycling program. So those programs do make a difference. So I just want to jump back to this graph that shows our emissions over time. So this way we can see where we are slightly compared to previous years, see a bit of a change. But what does this mean, and how can we understand this as how are we doing compared to our target? So when we look at the community energy investment roadmap and how that lays out how the city is going to meet its net zero emissions by 2050 target, we're actually looking at reducing our emissions year over year, gradually between 2020 and 2030, and doing more rapid decrease of emissions year over year between 2030 and 2050. We're starting to look at the data and what's been happening, and I think with a bit of time and effort, we would be able to come back and show what our year over year emissions look like compared to this line, this roadmap that's been laid out on how we're supposed to meet our 2050 emissions, basically to meet net zero. We can also look at we can project out the impact of activities that have already been identified in our Winnipeg and the community energy investment roadmap, and what implementing those activities could do on getting us on track with this carbon budget to meet 2050. Are there any questions?
So, yes, and a quick question. So,
Yep.
as new buildings, I'm looking at east of the red, the South Winnipeg Rec Center, the upgrades to St. James or the St. James Civic Center. As these new buildings or come online, or buildings are upgraded from an energy efficiency standpoint, the percentage of GHG emissions reduces, correct? For the city, from a city perspective.
If we add new buildings, we will expect to add energy and GHGs.
But we're adding it in a very more responsible way.
Right. Almost like a
And then-
GHG per unit of service
Oh,
sort of thing, right?
so I'm looking at, from a policing perspective, we've just moved out of Hartford. That was like a disaster of a building into a new North District station. So our GHGs will be dramatically reduced, even though we're taking on a new building, but we're jettisoning an old building that was really bad from a emission standpoint.
Right, so if, once you've moved into that new building, been there for a year, then we would be able to see the impact of that when we look at our annual energy use, natural gas use, electricity use, and calculate the GHGs for that.
But this all helps us get towards 2050. Okay.
Councilor Meeks?
There was an email this morning claiming there was an arithmetical error that saying that the claim was that 34% of Winnipeg's emissions come from buildings. I mean, the statement is that Winnipeg in that phrase is the city of Winnipeg as government, not the city of Winnipeg's total emission.
I haven't seen that email, so this corporate emission, corporate inventory doesn't include all buildings in the city of Winnipeg. So we call that the community inventory. So last time the community inventory was updated, that was part of the community energy investment roadmap. So that's the 2020 inventory, and that was adopted in 2022.
The objection was, in this document, it is claimed several times that energy use in city-owned buildings represented over 34% of total energy use in Winnipeg. And that city-owned buildings also contributed 21% of Winnipeg's GHG emissions. Winnipeg in that phrase is presumably the government. City-owned buildings presumably don't burn 34% of the energy for the entirety of
That's corporate.
the city of Winnipeg. It's corporate, as Edie says.
Right, I think I understand. So when we talk about city buildings, energy use and city building emissions and what percentage that is of the inventory, that's the percentage of the corporate inventory,
okay.
not this percentage of the community
Yeah,
inventory.
Thank you.
I'd seen that email. Is there a difference in the way we're collecting data from back in measuring 2020 versus today with, like, we've seen some continuous improvements in calculating and figuring out our GHG? Has there been a,
Yes. Yeah, so every year we're looking at improving our data collection and bringing ourselves more in line with the PCP protocol. So in 2023, we changed the way we incorporate the corporate waste data. And so you see that in 2023 and 2024. And when we make those improvements, we also backcast that change to previous years and include that in the report. So if you see a report that was published in 2020 and it talks about 2020 numbers and a report that was published this year, they can look different. So looking at the latest year would be the most up to date. And then we also make those updates and changes because this data is on Open Data Portal and on our website. So we really encourage people to look at that data, work with it, and do your own analysis. And then if there's something that needs to be brought to our attention, I'm very welcoming to that.
other questions, colleagues?
Nope.
All right, would one of you like to move it?
Don't move.
Yep, moving the report. All those in favor?
Okay.
Nobody's opposed, that is carried. Number 4, we've heard this here and it's been to the climate change action committee. Maybe you could just give us a brief update. Maybe Councillor Mays wants to speak to it.
Yeah, this was the building emissions reduction strategy report. It did come through SBC, and it was referred to the Climate Action and Resilience Committee to go there for, I guess, for information. I believe that committee, there was some action items added to it. This looks like a few changes, request to report regularly to the CARC, and also to calculate the social benefit cost per ton saved, if I'm reading that correctly. Yeah.
Councillor Mays, did you?
Yeah, some amendments from CARC, including the social benefit calculation that was used around casting widening. So the idea was to try and also give credit for that in other projects.
Not sure, I guess this, yeah, so goes, is this committee vote on those amendments, or how does that?
So it would just be voting on the recommendation of the Climate Action and Resilience Committee, and that goes up to Executive Policy Committee and Council.
Wanna move that, Brett?
Sure. So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Nobody's opposed, that is carried. Opt-out program for the advanced watering meter solution. I think you need some
Yes,
more time.
this is another extension. This, the report, this report came to be through a motion to investigate, you know, possible opt-out options for our advanced metering infrastructure program. I know we had come back previously with, you know, recommendation not to do that and some information on that. But this report was to come back with more details on the costing, and same thing as before. The report is done, but needs kind of one final review to make sure we're not missing any information. So we are technically asking to come back in September if needed, but could definitely come back here in June 27th, with their July meetings. But that's the gist of it. The report's very ready.
Want to move that, Councillor Chambers?
Yep.
All right, moving the extension. All those in favor?
Aye.
Nobody's opposed, that is carried. 6, semi-annual report on biotreatment. And the semi-annual is verbal, sorry.
Yes, we have a standing request to come to council to update you on the biosolids treatment capacity in our sewage treatment plant system. And this is our June report. It's verbal. Ms. Cynthia Weeb is here to provide us the verbal report on that. I won't steal her thunder. I'll let her.
Good morning, everyone. So in terms of our digesters, they do continue to operate as expected. And overall, we're still trending along the same lines as what we reported last December. We haven't seen any growth higher than what we would historically expect, and we're not aware of any substantial industries that have come or gone that could significantly impact where we're at. So all that said, most of the parameters that we measure are continuing to trend towards reaching capacity in the late 2020s, early 2030s. So that we estimate approximately 4 to 6 years of capacity, or 60,000 people equivalent. What it means to us right now, you know, to make it more tangible, is that as the capacity gets consumed, it's just lowering our resilience for times of maintenance or when we have to do any shutdowns. So for example, when we do take some equipment offline, we are noticing that we are coming closer to approaching, you know, the upper end of the parameters we would like to see. Recent and planned upgrades to the south end and the north end as well are going to help us manage our capacity, will help give us, you know, let us take that capacity longer. And we'll provide a revised update in written one in December of 2025. Now, are there any questions?
Yes, I know that there are plans to build, reconstruct a new lift station in St. Norbert, Darcy Lift Station. Does that add to capacity based on, you know, it's pushing more wastewater through?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So the more wastewater that enters the system from any means that it will make its way, the biosolids part, to the north end plant.
Yeah, so it wouldn't upgrade, so what are the plans to upgrade the Darcy Lift Station?
Well, there's a couple things going on there. So just to clarify, there's like the Southwest Interceptor would be a new crossing near, well, it's in kind of Fort Richmond-ish. That would increase our redundancy and reliability in the system to get existing sewage from that catchment area to the south end plant. But it also opens the door for more capacity into the southwest as demands increase. So it's kind of, that's future waste it's not like it's waste we're not capturing now. It's like as it's built and put in there. But the other thing, like the existing Darcy lift station is at the Fort Garry Bridge, where where we have the Henry bypass, that sort of thing. There's work to replace that crossing, obviously, with a permanent crossing. We do have a written report on the upgrade, an update on that project coming to finance in September. No, in September. The Fort Garry one is September. But yeah, it's not necessarily like those aren't adding treatment capacity.
Okay, and that's all I wanted to know is if you're capturing all of the wastewater currently.
Yes.
Upgrading the Darcy lift station is not gonna add capacity, it's just gonna make sure that, the issues that were prevailing in the past will no longer happen.
Right, but a very important point though to make that we want to kind of reiterate is that the project 2, like our digester project, obviously is the biggest capacity increase we're gonna get. That's the big ticket. But we are doing a whole bunch of other things to try to manage capacity as we come up on this deadline. And as a point to just try to improve the efficiencies of our process anyway. But like the North End plant, like project 1, the headworks, the improved grit screening we have there, that helps reduce biosolids demand. We're doing grit and the screening upgrades at the West End plant as well. The South End plant coming online and using biological nutrient removal creates less sludge. So there's a lot of other things we're doing. We're not just hanging all of our hopes on project 2. Project 2 will ultimately solve this problem, but we're making sure we're doing everything possible to manage the capacity that's so.
And then maybe I can just add, we need project 3 to be complete as well. So they go very, very hand in hand.
And you're still hauling sludge from the south end to the north end treatment plant.
Correct. The only place we process sludge is the north end.
Okay, but you're treating it, you're reducing it before you're sending it.
We do dewater it so that, you have less volume to truck, right? And we thicken it from both and then take it from south end, west end.
Yeah, at the north end, it's where we talk about digesters. Sounds kind of gross, but it's like we break down the sludge to stabilize it, so that it's so that you can do things with it. It can be fertilizer, it can be used in soil fabrication, that sort of thing. So that only happens at the North End plant. The rest of the sludge or solids, it gets dewatered, this sort of thing, yes, but then it's trucked.
More than I wanted to know about slag.
Actually, so trucks haul it from the south and the west plants?
20 a day.
Yeah, big
Trucks are-
tank, like tank trucks.
About 20 a day?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Not really.
Yep.
Ryan, you had questions?
2 questions, not directly related. Could I get something in writing explaining the further delay in the Fort Garry Bridge project? Because as one of the area councils, I've been getting negative feedback, shall we say, for about a year. And I've been telling people, because you folks told me it would be done in summer of 25, I've been planning for a year, and then I read in the newspaper that it's going to be done.
That counselor has received
Very-
something in writing.
It's very hard to maintain credibility when you're finding out policy shifts in the newspaper, so please send me something on why that's delayed yet another year. Second question, where's Michelle Bechtel, our great biosolids friend?
Where's what? Sorry.
Michelle Bechtel. Oh, good.
Yeah, no, sorry, and apologize.
And just to add, there's a lot of construction on
Yes.
Pembina and Abinochimicana, so it's just exacerbating those.
For sure. No, I understand the concerns,
Pipes underground.
the computer pain on the reduced lane width there. I totally understand. No, I wanted to apologize if there'd been any kind of miscommunication. Our target has consistently been to finish the work by the end of 2025. Construction starting at some point in 2025 and finishing by the end of 2025, December-ish or whatever. Yes, that has extended into through the winter months so that we would get done sometime in the spring. Part of that, I would argue, is not a policy shift per se. I believe that there's the bypass system itself, when we talk about in terms of moving sewage and preventing spills, that was the kind of policy priority, was to make sure that bypass was working properly. I do know, well, I mean, people will know, we, after our spill in February and spring, there was some subsequent spills. We report them online during large rainstorms. You recall we had some really nasty rainstorms come through in the spring of 2024 into the early summer as well. I mean, it was that crazy one with the snow or hail there that plugged catch basins and stuff. A couple big rainstorms, and it did exceed the capacity of the bypass. So we did spend a lot of time last year and into the early winter, making sure that we increased the reliability of the bypass to make absolutely sure it actually where it ended up is it has a little bit more capacity than the existing system had before this problem even occurred. So that was to kind of give us that confidence as to when we got into construction that we weren't, adding any risk if the construction took longer or we got into a wet weather season or this sort of thing. So that's where the focus was, certainly. The construction of the permanent crossing, the tender will close this month. We hope to get it awarded this month. And the construction will start this summer, but we don't think it will be finished by the end of December anymore. It will likely have to wait through the winter. And as you can imagine, the tie-ins where we abandon the existing or the bypass that's on the bridge that will be pulled off the bridge, the new stuff is all underground. But we don't want to do that during a flood situation or this sort of thing. So the timing of it is going to bring us at some point into that first or second quarter of 2026. Yeah. So that's the thing. But again, like I said, there's a total written report on the financials that was requested by SBC Finance. That's due in September, and we'll have that all in writing in September.
Good.
Okay. Do either of you want to move it?
Yeah, I'll move it.
All right. As for information, all those in favor?
Aye.
Nobody's opposed, that is carried. Moving on to housing affordability and impact.
Yes, so this is, I think I'm going for record here. This is our third request for extension here in this meeting. The report here was generated, was requested earlier this year in the context of our proposed rate increases. Some of the motion requested an analysis of the data the city doesn't actually have. And I'm talking about the correlating the rent increases with utility rates. It needs to factor out everything else that goes into rent increases, and we don't necessarily have easy access to the data or access at all that data. But we do have some feedback from city economists. We're working on some content to try to help frame what the rules are, that like rent increases can't just go up on their own. A lot of properties are governed on the residential tenancies branch. So we do have we are coordinating some information on that aspect of it. The part of the report that will speak in more detail about our affordability programs, like the H2O Help to Others, and things we're doing to increase eligibility so that the solid waste rate that we induce can be part of that program. That sort of thing, that's all done, but we're just trying to incorporate the rest of this economic information. That's why we're asking for extension. Again, same logic as the other ones. The report is essentially very close to being finished, but I'm still asking for 60 days just in case we need until September. This important context, this fall, we will be coming back with, have been tasked to come back with an update on our rates based on funding for Project 3. So it might be more topical in the fall. However, like I said, we'll still aim to have this at the next SBC meeting if possible.
Just to confirm, Mr. Shanks, just the CCPA, when they reported 10,000 homes, they were using Stats Canada data?
It appears they were looking at a 2021 census census statistic for 10,000 units.
So 2021, right? Okay. Any questions? Cool. So moving an extension.
So moved.
All those in favor?
I,
Nobody's opposed, that is carried.
I'll move to lay over item 8. It's really Sherry's thing, and she's not here, so I don't know that it would very much.
Oh,
Their update on Wildwood.
Can I, she is knowledgeable, another department is undertaking some work. I had her move this because it was more for my edification, because I was getting emails and complaints, so.
Carry on.
Yeah, that Counselor Rollins understands the whole problem.
Okay, then I can, and specifically what we're talking about here, I know that the motion talked about Wildwood floodplain. We took that to mean, essentially the area on, North Drive there. There's several bays, they're bays that are lettered, like Wildwood A, Wildwood B, this sort of thing. They're very different street arrangements. They're essentially back lanes only. The front yards are lawns with sidewalks, sort of thing. So there's a couple places like that in town. This is one of them. So it's a very heavily treed, very flat area. It's behind the primary dike system there. It's very hard to drain conventionally, but we specifically, a lot of the concerns brought up was delegation to committee, flagged some issues on the back lane in Wildwood C. So we did a deep dive on Wildwood C. I personally looked at the 10 years of data, operational calls, this sort of thing, because there's a history there of that back lane, one of the catch basins, freezing in the spring, and turns out plugging quite a lot in the fall. So we do have a lot of reports of that basin in that whole area, tree roots infiltrating into people's sewer service lines, but also the land drainage system. I should also clarify, this whole area is serviced by separate sewers. It's not a combined sewer district. There's no CSO issue here. So there's a separate land drainage sewer. So the catch basin in the back lane, it just takes runoff water and takes it away. So people's sewer lines from their homes, they go into a separate wastewater sewer and collect it differently. But all the pipes there, have root infiltration, and this catch basin and the catch basins in the whole block do, consistently have leaves. It's a very heavily treated area. It's a very nice area, but the leaves don't help, and other debris can get into the catch basin, and usually if that's missed, it can cause what is already a very difficult area to drain. Like the land drainage pipe is fairly flat. It's not a very aggressive slope in there, so it doesn't drain super fast to begin with. But if it's plugged with leaves, or if there's leaves in the pipe, it can cause standing water, and then that just makes it real bad in the spring. That sort of thing. We do notice that in the summertime, we don't usually have a lot of these calls, because normally when it rains, it seems to clear okay for a summerstorm, most summerstorm. Having said that, so that 10 years of data, the last time would be this particular sewer was televised, was in 2020. We did an inspection in there, and the pipe was in good condition. There was some tree roots in it, so we did clean the roots out in 2020, but there was no indication of any structural problems. This past spring, obviously there was a large flooding there, and the delegate at last meeting spoke to that. This past spring, Public Works does the thawing, not water waste. Public Works actually had an extraordinarily hard time thawing that land drainage sewer. So unusually hard time. So we actually went back this month to, or I guess it was May, to do an inspection, re-inspect to see what's going on. It looks like we might actually have to do a spot repair this time. So the residents would have seen that, make sure the council is aware of this. But it looks like we're gonna have to do a little spot repair on that pipe. But for the medium term, or medium or long term, we're still discussing with Public Works will do the surface restoration stuff, and if they're gonna renew the back lane in its entirety or not, that's up to them. But we do coordinate with them when they do that, if we want to upgrade any catch basins. So we're still trying to figure out what we want to do medium or long term. I would say though that it's very unlikely that a new land drainage sewer, new catch basin is really going to address this problem completely. because of the nature of the area, because of the difficulty in draining, it's very flat, and because of the debris buildup, we might look into some option of doing more frequent cleaning. Maybe something around the fall or something as well to try to help mitigate that. So that's the kind of options we're thinking about, but wanted to provide that background. If it's worth, if the committee's interested, like our overall approach to land drainage sewers is a little bit different than it is to sewers or water mains in terms of renewals. I don't know if Cynthia's here to speak to kind of our long-term or how frequently we inspect land drainage sewers in the first place. If there's any questions on that.
Yeah, like our, typically for land drainage, we inspect the sewers when the average age of the sewers in the district is 50 years. The sewers have kind of a 5-point rating, from 1 being like new, 5 being failed. So then we go back, depending on, the worse the sewer is, the more frequent we're going to re-inspect the 5s and the, we aim to do the 5s and 4s, depending on budget, or to rehabilitate those so that in an ideal situation, it's 3s across, is kind of the worst it gets. In some cases, we still do have some 4s, and those we re-inspect every 10 years.
Have you noticed a difference since the city stopped the fall cleaning, like with leaves and debris, where catch basins will plug and have standing water or sitting water in them?
In terms of sewer condition, it hasn't impacted that. Operationally, I'm not, I can't say, to be honest. Mhm.
Yeah, because we used to do a fall
Mhm.
cleanup, but a lot of, especially in the older areas, more mature areas that have established trees and whatnot. And I think it was 2017 or 2018 that we stopped doing, or even later than that, stopped doing the fall cleanups.
2017 was the stuff.
Be interesting to know. Yeah, that was my only question.
Okay.
But you need a layover of, you need an extension on this?
Oh, it was a verbal report.
This is just
Oh,
a
so just
verbal report for the
so receive
well.
it as information.
Wow.
You wanted to lay it over for Sherry.
Yeah, but
You do?
solve that.
Oh, you do? Okay. Wow.
Yeah, this is more of a Sherry item.
Yeah. Yeah.
Provided some issue to it.
Yeah, okay, so we'll accept this as information with a friendly amendment that you'll consult with the area councilor. Okay, so moved.
It has been moved. All those in favor?
I
Nobody's opposed. That is carried.
Move adjournment.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Nobody's opposed. That is carried.
All right.
Thank you, colleagues.